It's race one of the Fanatec GT2 European Series powered by Pirelli here at Spa-Francorchamps, and a blue sky day, 20 degrees air temperature. It is a stunning day to go racing and to take these GT2 cars around one of the most favoured circuits in the whole of Europe. My name is Ben Constanduris. In a few moments' time, I'll be joined by David Addison, and this is the third round or the third weekend, I should say, of their 6-weekend calendar for 2024. Track temperature, especially in the newly tarmacked areas, getting close to 50 degrees. It's unbelievably warm out there. As you can see, we have had about 50% of the circuit resurfaced, actually finished just before last weekend, where we had the British GT guys here to christen the circuit. And it is providing a lot more grip, but it's a very new tarmac, and therefore it still will be slightly sweating. That's providing the stickiness. But in these GT2 cars that like to move around a little bit, like to slide about, it is going to be very, very interesting to see how they cope. Eric de Donker is our onboard cameraman for the first part of the race. He'll hand over to Loris Huismans. And Eric, a man that is synonymous with Spa, a Belgian driver, of course. He does have part ownership in a team participating in GT3 for the 24 hours. He himself, though, participating as a bit of a one-off in the Pro-Am category today and tomorrow in GT2. We've got 7 different brands of car out on the grid, and we are going to be using the endurance grid, therefore the same grid as what we have in GT3. We've had a slight delay in proceedings thanks to various things happening in our historic classes that we've got here, also to celebrate the centenary edition of the 24 Hours of Spa. Of course, it wasn't always a GT3 race. Since 2000, we have had GT cars. It was a touring car race before, but it was a race that began in 1924, just a couple of years after the circuit itself was opened. And we have, as I said, 7 different brands, Maserati being at the front of the field and the favoured car for this first race, where the AMs will begin, and then they'll hand over to the pros if they're in the Pro-Am category, and they'll hand over to their second AMs, or indeed staying in the car if you are a one-driver lineup. David has joined me after a quick break, and it is continuing to be a stunning day at Spa.
Yeah, everybody was saying to me that during the course of today, the weather would change, it would get wet, and then it was going to get wetter as the weekend went on. But mercifully, the road is dry, and that's great news for AM drivers in cars that like a dry road, so they can stretch their legs. And the start of the race, as you can see, on the endurance side of the circuit, the endurance pits, sort of echoing the start of the 24 hours itself, which is a nice touch. Absolutely. Spa, not a place that these guys visited last year as part of the championship. And it's the first time, in fact, they've supported the 24-hour race itself. The calendar just coming out for next year. Go onto social media to check out 2025's calendar. Very similar to this year. They won't be a part of the 24-hour race, but they will race at Spa as part of Speed Week, as they did 2 years ago, I think it was. That's right, yes. Gosh, you're wishing the season away, talking about 2025.
We always do, though.
Not even got to July yet. 5-minute board just being shown. And the GT2 Series equaling its record best grid. It's good to see that the GT2 concept continues to grow. Lots of people have come and had a look at it, and for some it works, for some it doesn't, but the teams quite like it. And again, there's lots of track time available, isn't there? So it's always a good series to get your teeth into. So as the cars form up on the grid, quick word, Ben, about the pit stops for this first race, because based on where you were in the last races at Misano, there will be pit stop, not penalties as such, but compensation times. And the cars at the front, well, 812 gets 10 seconds. That car is going to start 4th on the grid. Number 1 will get 7 seconds. That's 2nd on the grid. And car number 80 will have 5 seconds. That is on the 7th rank of the grid. The car on pole position gets 14. Why 14? Well, it's a winning car, but a solo driver. So you get even more because of that. Car number 90 will get 7 seconds. That's to be found a bit further back, and 16, which is alongside it, will get 5. They are in the AM class, so perhaps less relevant for the overall contest. We'll come to their class battle in due course. But the reason for these pit stop penalties, or compensation times if you prefer, is so that you don't get the same winners all the time, and it just throws a little bit more jeopardy into the races.
And they're always entertaining because there is such a disparity between, especially the Pro-Am category, where you have the pros coming in for the second half of the race. We saw the pace about 3 to 4 seconds different from the leading Pro to the leading AM in Q1 versus Q2. Interestingly, though, a 2:16, I think it was, the pole time for race 2 with Pierre Caffer. That's only a couple of seconds shy of the GT3 pace that we've seen here. The GT2s and GT3s much closer than we would usually expect to see, and obviously it's very track dependent. But a good pace from Pierre Caffer in the Audi in qualifying 2. He will jump aboard the car in this race as the second driver. Expect that car, which starts last in the number 18, if it can stay on close as possible to the leader, watch that car come back through the field in the second half.
Sure. There is Petr Liza, who is new to GT2 this weekend, although he's an experienced endurance racer from things like the 24-hour series. He replaces a rather disgruntled Jan Krabec, as there the familiar KTM bodywork is about to drop down atop car number 80, which is going to be started in this race by Thomas Andersson. So there's the grid, which I think is complete, and the cars that you can see in the background coming down the pit lane are from the previous McLaren Trophy race. As far as the championships are concerned, the cars from Paul Ricard and Massano, results taken into account, and Jean-Luc Bobelic, Gilles Vanelay amongst the stars from Ricard in AM. From Pro-Am, it is the car of Leonardo Gorini and Carlo Tamburini that now puts itself ahead. There's the 15-second board, so they're rattling through the minutes to try and claw back some of the lost time from earlier delays, and then very shortly things will be underway. The car's going to be released very shortly indeed. So it's a very Maserati front of the grid, isn't it? The 3 of them, and then the KTM, which is a very distinctive shape. The Lamborghini leading car blast away. Green flag flutters to release the race cars. And Alexandre Leroy, pole position, and an AM as well. So a good effort, although AM rather does the drivers a disservice. It doesn't mean that they're no good. It just means that they're not as experienced as others, but very quick in their own right.
Well, we take Philippe Prep, for instance, who is rated as an AM, 3rd on the grid. He's been racing since for good 20 years now in various different series. Actually took part in the and took a class victory in the Spa 24 hours back in 2005, I think it was. So then has gone away and done Ferrari Challenge and all kinds of things. He's a Frenchman based in Monégasque, but actually registered for this race as a Hong Kong driver. Here is the grid then, with André Leroy, the AM, on pole position. Gorini also the AM alongside him. Philippe Pret 3rd in the Maserati, as I just mentioned, with the first of the KTM's 4th. Audi of Constantini in 5th position, and then Petrolisa with Anderson in 7th and Guibon in 8th spot. Eric de Donker, our on-board camera, right in the thick of the action, alongside Lawrence Tomlinson in the only Ginetta, which is an invitation car here, and then Libre and Sarmini, Stefan Parr in 13th in another of the Mercedes, alongside another Mercedes, and then we've got the Audi of Mukov in 15th and Handanez Ortega in 16th, with Doppelmayr 17th. A little bit off the pace in his Audi. The Lamborghini, great to have as a new brand on the grid, but Hernandez Ortega not really getting up to speed as yet in that car. Will start at the back of both grids.
Yeah, Michael Doppelmayr will be one to watch, not in terms of progress, but in terms of staying with the pack and then seeing what Pierre Caffer will have to do in his stint. That car really does need to stay on the lead lap. Michael Doppelmayr, a great enthusiast, absolutely loves his racing. Happy to admit that he's not the fastest driver in the world. That's why he's got a Pierre Caffer to do some of the hard work for him. But Michael Doppelmayr loves his racing, no question.
Absolutely, and always in different series. He's spread his wings across into an LMP3 car recently as well, and knows where his limits are. We don't often see too many mistakes from him.
No.
And it's just kind of maximising an opportunity. So a safety car, for instance, would help that car a lot in the first part of the race to bunch the field back up and give Pierre Caffer the opportunity to then charge through the field, as we've seen so often him able to do. In fact, that car has not taken an overall victory yet this season. It's been the number 2 LP Racing, which has taken 2 victories in both the first races. So expect the car on the outside of the front row to be very, very strong. And then the second races has been a mixed bag. We've had the KTM taking victory, the 89 and the 812, which was given a penalty, by the way, for not respecting the red flag after qualifying. And then that penalty was then rescinded because they had realised that there was perhaps an error. The other penalty I noticed that was given was that Philippe Pret was given a €300 fine for not having his overalls done up correctly when in the car. They were below the mandated 20 centimetre mark, which I didn't realise there was a mandated mark as to how loose you can have your overalls. But there was very specific regulation that was written about Philippe Pret, who is the owner of APM Monaco. It's a fashion jewellery brand.
Another one to watch is going to be Andre Mucovos with the Audi that he shares with Lorenzo Petresi that starts a long way back. Mucovos we saw in the Bronze Cup within GT3 last year in World Challenge Europe. But now, Ben, they get themselves into the side-by-side formation, down to the chicane, and race 1 of the weekend for Fanatec GT2 European Series, powered by Pirelli, is set to go.
Their first corner will be turn 1, will be La Source, or will they get flagged down the hill into Eau Rouge? Safety car, I believe, has pulled off.
Lights are on red on the gantry here, so this will be the start.
F1 start, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, Leroy just a little bit ahead of Guarini as they were very slow over the line. That's allowed Pret on the inside, the left-hand side, as we look at it, to look down the inside, but thinks against it. Such a pinch point, and indeed one goes round. We've got Eric de Doncker very slow in the middle of the pack, but the 53 has turned around. That's Pascal Gibon.
De Doncker was already hit, so there was contact that turned him sideways, then it straightened up again, and he's got damage. That's why he couldn't make the corner. Way, way, way wide goes Alexandre Leroy, coming up out of Raidillon for the first time. Then in second place it is Leonardo Guarini, and third is Philippe Pret, and in fourth Martin Koch in the KTM. But yes, it was sort of 4-5 abreast trying to go down towards La Source. You're right, Pascal Gibon got turned round, but even before that, De Doncker had been hit, and his car probably has got some suspension damage as a legacy. Lawrence Tomlinson's Ginetta up on the inside of Andre Mucovos. Been a real shuffle, hasn't there, as a consequence of that start? Yeah,
we have 3 cars right at the tail of the field. The 88, and then, as you mentioned, the 53. Doppelmayr has gone through. So actually, all cars seem to still be running, even if there might be a little bit of damage.
And there, Ortega in the Lamborghini down to Bruxelles. So Maserati 1, 2, 3, KTM 4, 5, 6 at the moment, with Martin Koch ahead of Petrolisa and then Thomas Anderson in the background. Lamborghini losing out because that's just lost a place, the car of Hernandez Ortega. But now, look, Guarini is on the attack, not only for the lead, but also to make sure he stays ahead in Pro-Am and gets a cushion between him and the opposition. And Guarini goes through on the inside of the pith path. So still Maserati's to the fore, but a new order.
Absolutely, and Philippe Pret looks very, very strong as well, doesn't he, in the second of the LP racing cars. He'll be in that car for the full race duration, so the full 50 minutes. He's a single driver entry in that car, so he'll want to be slightly pacing himself and making sure that he doesn't overdo it in these incredible temperatures. 21 degrees air temperature will feel more like 35 to 40 degrees inside the cars. I'm sure they have air conditioning, but it still won't necessarily be as cool as you would perhaps want as a gentleman driver racing around Spa.
But at least now they're moving. There's a bit of airflow through the car. Yeah. There is the 888 Stéphane Perrin Mercedes. Now that has had a really good first lap because from way, way back on the grid, that car finding itself in 7th place. Race order then, it is Guarini from Leroy from Pret. 4th is Martin Koch in the green KTM. 5th, Petrolisa. 6th, Thomas Anderson. Perrin is 7th. Tomlinson is 8th. And there is Stefano Costatini, who has picked up damage after the first couple of corners. And he has ground to a halt coming out of Pouen. So Stefano Costantini out of the race.
Done a great job of parking it in a good position for the marshals to easily push that back. in time before we get the cars at racing speed back in that position. So nice thinking from Cosentini, because there's nothing worse than a safety car needing to be pulled and racing laps lost under safety car conditions.
So here, KTM's at play. Thomas Anderson on the outside line, tries to go ahead of Petronita, outside into Lecombe, translates to the inside for the mid part, but he couldn't do it. And here comes Stefan Perrin at the inside, looks to try to go by, and does he do it? Not there. Right, the leader, Leonardo Guarini, getting away a little bit. Leroy is kind of the cork in the bottle, but he's defending a class lead, and he's quite at liberty so to do.
Yeah, absolutely. We should keep in mind that Guarini will have a pro in that car for the second half of the race, whereas Leroy and Pret both doing the full distance, so neither of them with a teammate. The interesting one is Martin Koch there, who's saying, I have to finish, and I have to finish well in every single round with this championship, with the midpoint of the championship. Koch sort of watching what's going on with those Maseratis.
So Leonardo Guarini pulling away, Martin Koch all over the back of Philippe Pret. There, with damage, is Stefan Perrin's Mercedes. That was
Gibon. That
was
Pascal
Gibon's car. That's the one he got turned around at the first corner. Sorry, yes, quite right. Right brand, wrong driver. There is the Donker's car. That was another one that got a bit of hit and shoulder at the start.
A little bit damaged the front end of the Donker, but...
Right, have a look at him in the mid-pack, because it all sort of concertinas across the road, and bang, he gets done by KTM and hits Costantini. That's why the Audi is out. Then, around went Gibon.
And he was hit pretty heavily from Costantini in the Audi as well. So I reckon a radiator pack done on the Audi.
Another angle of it.
This will be a good angle from behind.
So the KTM gets squeezed, it's a bit of a pincer, and then the Audi gets tagged into as well. Another of the KTMs, which was Sedi Simoni's car, badly delayed, lucky to get away with that. This is how Dodonka felt it.
Oh. It's had contact from behind and contact at the front of the car, so the car doesn't look too bad considering.
No, absolutely right. But what a feeling, you know, first corner of the race and you get pinballed like that. They're going through. Alexandre Leroy still ahead of Philippe Pret. Remember, this is the AM class battle, and they've really gapped Martin Koch over the course of that lap, haven't they?
Yeah, but Guarini has also got away to the tune of 3.1 seconds. It was Guarini, he was the fastest man out on circuit with a 2:20.7. Everybody else in the 2:22s. So clear air and no hassling from anybody else, really helping the Italian in the number one. Whoa, Leroy nearly losing the rear end there through Lecombe. And that should give Philippe Pret the opportunity to look down the inside. There's two lines into Bruxelles, both work, but neither were able to overlap each other. The next opportunity here, dive bomb down the inside of what was Speaker's corner. I think this is now officially Jackie Ick's corner, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And then down to Pouon, which really is a bit tricky to overtake. Pouon's the kind of corner where these cars are going to be really moving around underneath the drivers as the temperatures get into the tyres. Have they got their pressures right? It was 15 degrees for qualifying this morning. Air temperature is now 21, but more crucially, the track temperature must have over doubled from what we saw this morning, with track temperature being registered now at 47 degrees, 48 degrees now. Newly surfaced karting and curve pool Fred, and back onto the original surface, all the way down to Blanchiment. It changes again, I think, somewhere around here. No, Blanchiment's the old tarmac by the looks of it from there. There will be track limit warnings to watch out for as well. Here comes Pret, looks down the inside, and that's going to be a nice move. He's going to claim the apex on the right-hand side, squeezes the 24 to the left, and Leroy drops to second in class, third overall. Now Philippe Pret can get his head down and start chasing down Guarini.
Martin Koch has joined in as well, hasn't he? Because he's right there now on the back of Leroy. But that is a Pro-Am car, 812, so that's going to try and get through the traffic somehow.
Although it has the AM in it at the moment, let's not forget that the whole of the field effectively are AM drivers. So even if they're in two classes, that really only comes into effect in the second half of the race, where then the pros really start showing what they're able to do. And as we said in the build-up, a 3-second difference between qualifying in this Q1, where it was only AMs, versus the pros that managed to get out and qualify in Q2. with Pierre Caffer setting the pace in that one.
Although that's the car that is in last place at the moment. So Michael Doppelmayr having to keep that on the lead lap. What Caffer needs somehow is a magic button that just as he's getting into the car, he can trigger a safety car. That's easier said than done. Here's the battle though, because the Lamborghini under attack to the inside line goes Eric de Doncker, but he can't really get up the inside there. So that means that the Lamborghini stays ahead, at least for the moment. A bit of a rattle over the curve. Alfredo Hernandez Ortega keeps his position.
Very wide there, descending down the hill. It's all downhill from here.
I know the feeling.
And again, that kind of such an unconventional line going into Bruxelles, because there's so much camber in the corner there, that you are able to kind of drive across the road and hook an early apex. But the more conventional line can work as well. De Doncker with thousands upon thousands of laps around Spa-Francorchamps. Mexican Hernandez Ortega has been here before, a few years, but in that Lamborghini doesn't seem to be particularly gelling with it at this moment in time. We have got an Audi in the pits. Unfortunately, it is the all-white, kind of brand new 66 of Mukov, who's brought his Audi into the pits. Was supposed to share that with Lorenzo Patrese. They never got that car out in Q2. Now it's back in the pits. I wonder whether there is a problem with the car.
Yeah, or whether this is a sort of glorified test session for a car that's new to that team. Well, as you rightly say, either way, it's back in the pit lane. A little bit of dust kicked up by Alexandre Leroy then ahead of Martin Koch, who does need to get through the traffic. You're right about these all being AMs, but what this is doing is giving Reinhard Koffler, who will take over that car, a much harder task against Carlo Tamburini, who will take over there, way out front, the leading Maserati, in that second stint, especially as the KTM has to serve 10 seconds in the pits to the 7 of the Maserati.
Yeah, we've got to take into consideration all those penalties, 3 seconds extra stationary. It feels like an eternity when we're talking about tenths of a second between cars right now. There's an 8-second advantage between Guarini and Pret at the head of the field, but the rest of them are all pretty close to each other. The next big gap is Stéphane Perrin, who is 5 seconds behind Vanelay. Here are the gaps then. We've already had Guarini through, very close between 3rd and 4th, Leroy and Koch. There's been a change for Vanelay, who's got ahead of Lisa. So Mercedes ahead of KTM. That is Perrin coming through. Then the next to the KTM's Anderson with Lawrence Tomlinson just behind. And still the battle rages on. This time De Donker's got more momentum coming up the hill. Gosh, the back end of Guibon's Mercedes looks a right mess. We've got 2 rather messy Mercedes at the tail of the field. De Doncker gets through up to 11th. Gibbon failing to get past Sarmini. So this is really, other than that Lamborghini, the battle of those that were delayed at turn 1.
So meantime, they're diving down through Bruxelles, 53. That's the recovering Mercedes after the early dramas. But Pascal Gibbon will give way to Christophe Bure. They've done a pretty decent job of recovering here, haven't they? Because they got back onto the train of cars despite losing big chunks of time at the start. Now
De Donker's checked out, in 11th position and disappearing from these 3. No doubt the Mercedes isn't going to be feeling particularly great in the hands of Gibbon with all that damage to the rear end. The front end looks unscathed, and Sarmini was basically just parked up. He didn't get hit, he was just trying to avoid everybody spinning, and that's why he got so delayed at turn 1. And Hernandez Ortega just difficult to get past right now.
So there the cars currently work lap 5. Now there's pit window, and we're only 8 minutes away from that. And of course, in some cases, the cars will be in early to make sure they get the quicker driver in for as long as possible.
Momentum from Pascal Gibbon out of Stavelot, out of Curve Paul Frere, to maybe challenge Hernandez Ortega into the chicane. Meanwhile, up in 3rd position overall, still. Koch shadowing Leroy for 3rd. And Pret really hasn't got away. The gap's up to 10 seconds between Guarini and Pret. And even though he's got up into 2nd position, it's not as though he's grown that gap over his main competitor in AM right now. Vanelay has moved up a position for 3rd in class, got ahead of the KTM that last time through, and is only, well, is in the back of shot. Is only 2.5 seconds off the back of Koch. In fact, it's got to be less than that. That Mercedes really motoring right now.
Yeah, Gilles Vanelay flying. He has done an absolute best within the 1st sector. So he's going great guns. Gilles Vanelay, hugely experienced driver, great character. And he and Jean-Luc Beaubelic make a pretty good partnership in that car with so many years of experience. Leonardo Guarini, the race leader, still has the fastest lap of the race to his credit. The Ginetta of Lawrence Tomlinson, incidentally, 9th, new to the championship. And there, despite all the damage, Pascal Gibon has cleared 1. He's about to clear 2. Good effort that on the run up towards Les Camps. Cedric Simon, his KTM runs out of road. And then the Lamborghini of Alfredo Hernandez Ortega just about recovers, but it's dropped down the order.
Does look very, very good, doesn't it?
It does.
Even if it might be a little bit of a handful for Hernandez Ortega to extract the best pace out of it, it looks great to have an extra brand on the track as it is right now. I'm not sure whether the Gibon car is going to get it to the end. There's all kinds of bits of bodywork dragging along the floor, and down the Kemmel Straight, it was producing quite a lot of smoke as it made those positions up.
They might be able to do a sort of running repair at the pit stop. If there's anything that's dragging, they might be able to either rip it from or tape it up. I was just thinking about where cars are in terms of track position. Through Blanchimont, the race leader to the bus stop. Out of Les Camps, Michael Doppelmayr. So Pierre Caffer, I think, will be okay to stay on that lead lap, but he's going to be a really tall order to get back onto the mix.
A nice challenge for Caffer to really show what that Audi is able to do in the hands of a consummate professional, one of the very, very best.
So we've lost an Audi of Stefano Costatini, we've lost an Audi of André Mukovoz, and the surviving Audi is the one that's going to have to do all the catching. There is Gilles Vannelet. Didn't do the fastest lap, the first good sector, possibly with a tow, wasn't then backed up. Behind him you've got Petro Lisa, then Stéphane Perrin in treble 8, the Jürgen Wiebahn shared car. Tommy Anderson, after a good start, has dropped back. And then in 9th place, Lawrence Tomlinson, and Dominic Liebel is in 10th place right now. Dennis Liebel, I should say. Dominic Olbert, Dennis Liebel, the 2 drivers of that car. Vannelet's on the attack, though, here.
Yeah, he's got loads of momentum, really, really strong through Eau Rouge and Radiant, and clears the KTM very, very easily. That was all because he was so strong up the hill, and the KTM didn't have the same momentum. So Vannelet moved himself up into 4th. It's not a change for class yet, but it does put him in shooting distance of the 2 Maseratis just ahead, and they are for Am.
And Vannelet and Beaubelic have no extra time to serve in the pit, so they'll gain on that anyway relative to the race leader. So Martin Koch losing a place, and they've got to serve the longest pit stop of all in the Pro-Am category. There's Formula Maserati then, it's still Pret ahead of Leroy, but Vannelet going great guns, and that car, it's almost like it's woken up. You know, in the last few laps, suddenly it's become a real factor. It's caught, it's passed, it's gaining ground all the time, but it wasn't doing that at the very start.
I mean, these track temperatures are so high that it really depends on how the tyre is coming to you, how you've set up the car. I would presume the Maseratis potentially have gone a little bit too high on pressures, and it just got so hot that actually the cars are not being as fast as the Mercedes is now coming into its window because they've predicted it is so hot, and they've started the pressures potentially very low.
So there, 2nd, 3rd, small gap, 4th, 5th. Through they go. Still Leonardo Guarini, who last time around did a new fastest lap of the race. So he is absolutely determined that that car is going to be able to clear the 7 seconds over the opposition that it needs to maintain its advantage. Vannelet brakes for the chicane. Now, we are 3 minutes and a bit away from the pit window opening. What's interesting me is where cars are going to be on the track relative to the window opening. In an ideal world, Doppelmayr would be the first one in, because if he has to do another lap, they're going to lose a big chunk of time.
That's a change for 7th. Anderson ahead of Stéphane Perrin. At the chicane, nice and easy. Stéphane Perrin with plenty of experience around here in the 24H series. Actually had a big accident here, must be 3 years ago now. Was T-boned, and that put him out of racing for a good year before coming back. And usually seen in a GT3 Audi, but for this year, moving into GT2, suits him very well.
Here was the move then. KTM to the inside line into the chicane. Stéphane Perrin on the outside. Thomas Anderson on the in.
Barely could see the KTM behind.
Absolutely. But you felt it. Yes. That's for sure. You couldn't see it, but you felt it as it squeezed through. So now Gilles Vannelet sets off in pursuit, not of Leroy, because he's got past him, but of Philippe Pret. You see what I mean about the car coming alive? All of a sudden, it's caught, passed, caught, passed, caught, passed. Bang, bang, bang. Vannelet up the order.
Yeah, and to be fair, actually, Pret and Leroy are on the same pace as they've been throughout the race. It is very much that Vanderlei has found time. He's the only other driver in the 220s. Goring is setting 2:19.8, so basically 220s. And although Vanderlei is a couple of tenths slower than the leading pace, it's not that far off. So that Mercedes really, really working right now.
Now Jean-Luc Beaubly will take over that car as we have a replay of the pass. So Vanderlei, with all of that grunt and a toe, lines it up, darts out of the slipstream of Alexandre Leroy and just breezes past.
He is so good up Eau Rouge. He must have that car really set up to carry maximum momentum up the hill in a way that the other three cars around him seem to be blending off the throttle. We do have a speed trap up there, and yet Vanderlei was 20 kilometers an hour faster than Leroy at the speed trap. Now the speed trap is at the end of the Kemmel Straight, I think.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
So that's how much extra momentum he's carrying, and the Mercedes dips heavily on the brakes. These cars, as I said in qualifying, they are set up quite a bit softer than you would see in a GT3 car. That's to generate grip. That's to allow mechanical grip rather than reliant upon aero grip, because there's not so much aero on GT2 cars. And that's why, especially that Mercedes, with its also has to run quite high because of the balance of performance that all these cars also conform to. And that's why you see it dipping so heavily under brakes when they're heavy braking zones into chicane and Lecombe. Let's watch him up through here. So smooth. No problems at all with any kind of sliding whatsoever. The car not skipping around. And he carries that momentum then all the way along the Kemmel Straight. And the Kemmel Straight is still uphill. It doesn't look like it from the TV, but when you run it, David, you know. Not that I've ever done that, to be fair.
But you are right. You do realise you get to the top of Radion and you think, oh, good, it's going to flatten now. And it doesn't. It keeps climbing. Really, only to this point, as you come out of Lecombe now, that is the first time you actually crest the brow and start to go downhill. And it's quite a relief when you're on foot. So 87 then, Gilles Vanderlei pressing on. We are now at the at the 30-minute mark, and that means the pit window is open. So Doppelmayr has gone a lap down, and Leonardo Guarini will be the first in, if he elects to pit this time. Doppelmayr certainly will come in, but they've lost a lap. And there,
somebody's lost their exhaust.
I would propose that has come off the back of Pascal Gibon's Mercedes, seeing that that was the one disassembling itself. Fair bet, you reckon?
Yeah. Although I'm not sure I'd place that on the back of a Mercedes by the looks of it. Let's have a look at the rear of this car to see if it sort of suits. Yes, I think you're right, doesn't it? 4 exhausts, 2 on the left, 2 on the right.
So a rather exhausted part has come to grief on the road. That might end up being a full course yellow, just so somebody can drag that off the track.
Or just as the pit window opens as well. Going to heavily affect the race.
Well, yes and no, because they'll all be at the same speed, they'll all be in the same order, and it will be released. You know, it shouldn't take...
But if you pit under the full course yellow, you gain versus somebody who pits under green.
Yes, indeed. Yeah. But I think we're expecting pretty much everyone to be in this time. Let's wait and see what happens, because there is Doppelmayr being lapped by Pret, by Vanderlei just, and Alexandre Leroy tries to go through, and they're not pitting. So Pret stays out as a soloist, Vanderlei stays out, Leroy stays out. Okay, now where is that bit of debris?
And Martin Koch absolutely attacked that pit lane entry, but Doppelmayr was quite slow going in and not attacking the pit lane's limit. So Martin Koch's been slightly held up there because there's no overtaking, obviously. It's a very narrow pit lane. And look, Stéphane Parent attacks the line, gets onto the pit lane speed limit, but the KTM ahead was already at speed limit, and that can cost you a couple of seconds if you don't attack hard.
Interestingly, though, the race leader stayed out, so Leonardo Guarini does another lap, so that means that you've got Martin Koch in, you've got Thomas Anderson there in, you've got Stéphane Parent in, and Michael Doppelmayr in as well. So those are the pit stoppers. Doppelmayr having gone a lap down, as I said.
There's no yellow flag out, so I'm assuming that there was quite a big gap in traffic, about half a lap's worth of a hole where a marshal could have gone out and picked up the exhaust.
I think it's just offline. I mean, I'm trying to glimpse it when they came over the line last time, and I think the cars just move away from it naturally. It's the line that they take, so it might not be a big problem. Or it might be that the race director is prepared to leave it there until the pit window is closed, and then we are able to move it. A 5-second time penalty has been added for car 16. That's the Sedi Samini and Klaus Angerhofer KTM. And that is the track limits. Right, here is Michael Doppelmayr out of the car. It shows you just the length of the pit lane because he was in a while ago, but it's a long, long drive all the way around to the far end. In gets Pierre Caffer.
Got to get his seat insert in first. Caffer and Doppelmayr quite different in stature. Although Caffer's not the very skinny racing driver that he once was. He's definitely more. Well, he's actually my age, and he's definitely looking more like me than he once was.
Race leader into the pit lane, he says, moving on. Leonardo Guarini then comes in, race leader, and that car dominating the first stint, and Guarini doing a very, very good job. He got one track limit warning, but after a penalty was incurred at Misano, kept out of trouble there. Pierre Caffer gets ready to rejoin the race. Now remember, this car will lose 7 seconds in the pit lane. Is that enough to put Pierre Caffer back on the lead lap?
And Pierre Caffer can put himself on the lead lap as well once he gets up to speed, there's no doubt.
Although Tamburini's certainly not slow. And that Maserati, a newer iteration of a GT2 car, Van is the Audi. So, yeah, let's see. This is interesting that it's staying out for so long. Vanelay showing good pace, but he's not putting Jean-Luc Blanchemin into the car. Sorry, Jean-Luc Bobelic into the car just yet.
He might even get Philippe Pret here.
Yeah. Once
again, up the Camel Straight. The momentum of that Mercedes, the grunt, just instantly getting him ahead, hard and late on the brakes. Really drives that car like you would expect to see a professional racing driver do so, throwing it around, relying upon the high center of gravity from the Mercedes, and up into the net lead right now, but of course the number 1 has already pitted from the lead. We haven't had pit stops from Pret, we haven't had pit stops from Alexandre Leroy, and Vanelay will pit and hand over the car. Lawrence Tomlinson, the only other car not to pit, but he also isn't handing the car over to anybody else.
But you still need to make sure you come into the pit lane before the window closes. You don't have to leave, but you do have to be in. Guarini out, Tamburini in to the lead car with an extra 7 seconds to serve. Mechanics, videographers, busy pit stops all round. And here, Vanelay ahead of Pret. So another move successfully ticked off. He's made it past the Maserati. Amazing second part of this opening stint for Vanelay. Like I keep saying, the car really having been on a massive charge. And there it is up into second place now. And depending on whether he stays out for another lap, would lead the race.
And the last lap was his best as well. So the car and himself continuing to get better. No wonder they're keeping him out there because he's absolutely in the zone. A 2:20.3 was the fastest he's able to do. And you would have thought the best of the tyres would have been on the first couple of laps. Hard on the brakes once more. And once again, through the chicane to head over the line and register another lap. He's still got a few minutes before that window opens, but I think he might have to come in next time by. And he'll come in shadowed by Philippe Pret just behind him.
Indeed so. Right, so Vanelay is the new race leader. You saw Lego a minute ago, Leonardo Guarini standing by with Carlo Tamburini into the car. And we are now down to 23 minutes and change to the race to go. Leonardo Guarini then out of the car. And there in the background, Carlo Tamburini about to rejoin. Let's hear from Leonardo Guarini. He's with Antonia as there is his car back on track.
Leo, you've had an incredibly dominant season already so far. Will that continue?
We're working on it. So, I mean, here I like Spa very much. I've done 2 times the 24 hours. 1 time was aborted the 3rd time. So I know the track quite well. And yeah, they did an incredible job on the car because we were struggling in the beginning due to the new surfacing. But apparently things are getting better.
Is the new surfacing helpful or is it a detriment?
It's much better, but what happens is that you've got so much grip that it's difficult to get grip back in the front. So you're understeering, and you need to manage the tire wearing.
Okay, well, looking ahead to the rest of the weekend, obviously we've still got another stint to go. What do you think your chances are?
I'll tell you that after this race, because depending on what we get, but we'll do our best. We'll keep on pushing.
Well, you've done very well so far. Thank you.
Now, you've just seen the rather sorry sight of the Matej Homela KTM that's ground to a halt. I was trying to work out, Ben. I think that's just on its outlap. It's just come out of the pit lane. And that's a little bit reminiscent of what we saw at Misano, where the car just mysteriously would expire, and it's happened again.
I don't think he's even managed to get out of pit lane, because obviously the pit lane runs up the side of Eau Rouge and rejoins the circuit after that complex. And he's pulled up halfway up the hill. We still don't have pit stops from our top two. And so if there's any kind of full course yellow or safety car, these two are going to benefit from that. They're going to have to come in this time. Not enough time to do another lap. But our leading two come in. And now we need to watch where that #1 car is of Tamburini in relation to these two, that he, in theory, is still racing for the lead.
And bear in mind as well that neither of these have any compensation time to serve in the pit. So it's a natural pit stop, or a regulation pit stop at the minimum, nothing else. So it's going to put Carlo Tamburini back into the lead. And the fastest lap of the race has just been done by Pierre Caffer. The timing screen says Michael Doppelmayr, but it most definitely is Pierre Caffer.
And that's his first lap out the pits already in a 2:19.4. We know from qualifying he's able to do faster than that. And everyone else has now pitted. Pit window, or pits are going to shut very soon. And a little battle between Power and Koffler there. Remember the 8-1-2 of Martin Koch was one of the first to pit, was up in that top 4 battle. The 888 was not. Is it Stefan Parra still aboard that car? It won't be, will it?
No, to the UV now, I think, won't it? Who's taking that car over. Everybody should have done their pit stop by now. So you're either rejoining or you've already done the stop and you're on track as Pret. Oh, no, only now he's arriving at the
It does take forever.
box. But that's bizarre, because he was only 0.7 of a second behind Vanderlei when he came in, and we saw the Vanderlei pit stop cycling through. So where's Pret been? Didn't stop in the F1 pits and couldn't find the team, did he?
It's possible, isn't it?
And he hasn't got a penalty.
Oy. Tamburini, that's the second time in 2 laps we've caught Tamburini and Fagna giving plenty of space to the right apex there. The car's really moving around here. Window is now shut. Tamburini desperately trying to get as efficient a lap. In-lap, out-laps are always very important. Belts being done up for, well, not for Vanderlei, because it's Jean-Luc Bourbelic now in the car. Here is Vanderlei. Sorry, here is our leader, Tamburini. It will be Bourbelic that leaves the pits. Pret should also leave the pits as well, but Tamburini's not happy with that car. He's understeering all over the place. He's missing apexes. He needs to settle himself down here if they want to take victory. They've taken victory in race 1 in all 2 occasions so far this year. And what's it going to be? They're quite close to the pit lane exit, so they don't have to trundle at 60 kilometers for long. But the #1 is going to re-inherit the lead, isn't it?
I think so. Away goes the Mercedes, away goes the other Maserati. Now they're up to race pace, but storming on by goes then the #1 Maserati. Back up front goes Carlo Tamburini. And then second is going to be Jean-Luc Bourbelic, and third is going to be Philippe Pret. And that also, of course, is a change for the lead of the AM class, because Bourbelic and Pret are in AM. Mercedes is ahead.
Feels like bigger gaps as well than before we went to the pit. Certainly between Bourbelic and Pret.
Well, Pret was ahead by 0.7 of a second, and now it's the other way. And we saw how much later arriving at the pit box was Philippe Pret. Something went wrong in that pit stop. Whether the car, got blocked by another, whether he went to a rogue pit box in the top pits, I can't tell you. But there's got to be some reason for hemorrhaging that amount of time, because the pit time was something like, well, no, only 3 seconds slower. But he just seemed to be a lot slower arriving at the pit box. Very odd.
And behind these 3, our leading 3, is the #18 of Pierre Caffer. That's not because Pierre Caffer is in 4th place. That's because he is a lap down from the top 3 in total. Now, expect Caffer to carve through those 3. He should have pace to be able to do so. Although, actually, that last lap time wasn't particularly strong. 2:22.6 from the #18 car. And we know that the circuit is offering better than that. Instantly, though, with Philippe Pret already up to speed in his Maserati versus Jean-Luc Bobelic getting up to speed. This is his out lap, remember, because the 87 car has changed drivers, but the number 2 has not. And there, I always think there's an advantage in that. In the first 2 laps, where your new driver, it's so hard to just jump in a car and be at pace, especially against a driver that has already done a full stint. And Pret tries to go around the outside, now goes to the inside of the chicane, and does get it slowed down, so he moves up back into 2nd position.
Brave stuff. Yeah, there are championships where if you're a soloist, you have to have a longer pit stop time just to try and balance things out, as you say, to allow that incoming driver the chance to assess what everything is about. Bobelic then has lost the class lead, but he has a look back on the inside. Philippe Pret may have had a slower pit stop, but he's made amends on track because he's caught and passed that Mercedes, and look, straight away starts to pull clear.
Let's have a look at Bobelic up through Eau Rouge and Radion, because this is where his teammate was so good. Oh, Bobelic's completely offline, though. Had to get well out the throttle. And it's a bit naughty, because there is yellow flags covering that area to try and get rid of Mato Homola's KTM crossbow. So that wasn't a good lap to watch necessarily, but I still say that that Mercedes has got good grunt versus the Maserati along the Kemmel Straight, because he's right back with him despite a horrible approach to Eau Rouge and Radion.
Interestingly, behind is Pierre Caffer charging along. So he is not on the lead lap, most obviously, but he is still charging. We've got that yellow flag, of course, in that first sector where the KTM is being retrieved. That is Alexandre Leroy. Now, don't forget, he had to serve 14 seconds in the pit. So not only has that cost him a lot of time, it has also cost him the top 2 places within the AM category. So 3rd beckons, but having led it briefly early on from pole position, not the result he wanted.
But to pay attention to the Pro-Am category cars now. That is in 2nd position, Simon Birch, and then Ronald Koffler 5th and 6th at the moment, but those 2 should be going faster than the 3 AMs ahead of them if you pay attention to the Pro-Am kind of denominations is the word I was looking for. And then Loris Heismans, of course, in the number 98 Mercedes, sits in 8th position, 5 seconds back from, well, it's not Stefan Perrin anymore, is it?
Jörg Wiebahn, I think.
Yeah. Timing saying they haven't yet changed their knob on their steering wheel, because that's how timing knows which driver is which. Driver 1, twist a switch, driver 2, and that then tells timing who's in the car.
So there, Simon Birch is currently running in 5th place. Comes up towards Blanchimont and pressing on in pursuit of Leroy. Now this is a Pro-Am chasing an Am. 2nd indeed in Pro-Am is that KTM. So out of the chicane goes the KTM, and Simon Birch, he's never going to catch Tamburini, is he? But 2nd in class beckons, but he'd like to clear the traffic if he can.
Gap stays quite similar to how we saw it pre-pit stops, just around 10 seconds between Tamburini and Pret at the head of the field. Now, Louis Pret is a Macanese flagged driver for this race, although lives in Monaco, has raced under a Monegasque flag and a French flag, but Tamburini off the road, was he not just there? Or am I imagining things? He seemed very wide and now under pressure from a car that's a lap down. Was that him trying to get by Angerhofer?
I think it was, yeah.
And kind of being forced onto the gravel.
But Tamburini is leaving nothing on the table, as you kind of get used to seeing. He's had a couple of track limit warnings already. Now, they are reset, but he's now on 3 warnings, and they had a penalty for track limit abuses at Misano that effectively cost them a win. So now, Tamburini needs to be very, very close to the edge, but not over it if he wants to stay out of hot water. Replay of Jean-Luc Bobelic.
Wow.
Way, way wide. And out through the gravel.
He was a long way away from the apex at Blanchimont, wasn't he? He's lost that, I think, on turn-in. And here he was. He was full 4 wheels on the gravel. But the gap hasn't come down very much for Tamburini.
Just kept his boot in, even, drilled it, came out the other side. And Carlo Tamburini then still hangs on to the lead. But I wonder whether there's something on the road all of a sudden that's catching out people. It doesn't look like there is, but Bobelic, as you say, was way, way off the line. That's okay for Tamburini. But like I say, he is now on 3 track limit warnings, and that's only within his stint, because they reset after the pit window closes. So Tamburini here does need to be careful.
Well, you've got a track limit warning for driving through the gravel. It's definitely not gaining an advantage,
No,
but it is driving off track.
You are off the track, yeah, exactly.
Gap down to 7.4, so he has lost 2 seconds with that excursion, and Pret has obviously now not got hassle from Jean-Luc Bobelic, who's lost 9 seconds with that excursion on the exterior of Blanchiment.
And that also brings now Alexandre Leroy a little bit closer to him. There, look, in 24, Simon Birch keeping Reinhard Koffler at bay as they come into La Source now through the hairpin.
Yeah, so this is the battle for 4th position.
Yeah.
And second in... No, it's not a battle for class, is it?
No,
because Simon Birch is Pro-Am.
Correct, different classes.
There's that smoke coming off the front left wheel of the KTM that we saw in practice, just in the compression of Eau Rouge. Really is a roller coaster ride for these guys that when you go through there, your whole car, suspension, compressed into the tarmac as you mount the hill. The body gets pushed down into the seat as well. I do remember when we came here for World Touring Cars one year, the front-wheel drive and front drive cars would lock the steering as they tried to go up the hill with the pressure of forces of going onto that car.
And we've had reports of that for some GT cars this weekend as well, so it's still a feature, if you like, of Spa. We've got just over 10 minutes of the race to go. Simon Birch pressing on here in his quest to get onto terms with Alexandre Leroy. Up front, Carlo Tamburini still leads the way, and the margin that he's got, 7.6 seconds over Philippe Pret, the driver with his Hong Kong licence these days. And Jean-Luc Bobelic running in 3rd place, but dropping back. And Bobelic being caught by Leroy, even though he's got his hands full. Pierre Caffer, though, is the quickest man on the circuit. Now, just to give you an idea, his last lap was 3.9 seconds quicker than the leaders. So that gives you an idea of what Caffer can do, but for the loss of time. And there he is, chasing after Pret to try and unlap himself from one of the Maseratis, but it's just a joy to watch Pierre Caffer at work, isn't it?
It's a joy to watch a GT2 car being really driven hard. They do move around, you can see them moving around, you can see the drivers fighting with the cars, and it's lovely to see, honestly.
Now, there is a 12-second time penalty for a pit stop too short, and that's going to Jean-Luc Bobelic and Gilles Vanelay. Now, that doesn't necessarily account for why the Maserati was late arriving at its box, but it does partly tell the story of why that was so far ahead coming out. So, Bobelic and Vanelay, 12-second penalty to the 87 Mercedes.
And at the moment, that would drop them from 3rd down to 7th position. So it's a heavy penalty. As we get through the remainder of this second stint, if we don't have safety car, then they might lose less positions. They're going to lose the same amount of time, but as the field continues to spread. Simon Birch continuing to put pressure on Leroy for 4th position, but at the moment not being able to find a way through, which is impressive from Alexandre in the TFT Maserati. Whoa, KTM very, very late on the brakes. They're dancing around underneath the rear wing of the Maserati. That's where you just got to be careful as a pro driver not to be caught out by the characteristics of an AM driver who is likely to brake a little bit earlier, is likely to have a few more mistakes, and so often you're trusting the guy around you to do what you expect them to do. And Simon Birch there felt as though he was jumping on the brakes kind of in avoidance rather than trying to overtake. He's got a bit closer because Leroy was a little bit wide through Bruxelles, and now through the double gauche, again a little bit wide. Birch has got more momentum. They're closing in also on Jean-Luc Bobelic, and down the inside into the first part of Fagnes. Hooks the curb as well, gets the car right over that right-hand curve, and has made that move stick. So it moves him up into 4th for the moment, but it could well be 3rd with Bobelic losing. Well, it is 3rd actually, because Bobelic's already got the penalty.
That's right, so he's within striking distance, isn't he? So Birch 4th, Leroy 5th, and Reinhard Koffler's KTM 6th, 812. That's struggling. Oh dear, big damage there, having been off the road. That's number 90, I would offer you. Dominic Olbert at the wheel, and there's gravel showering out of the front of it. Yes. He's been off the road, he's hit the barrier, as you can see, and he's dragging the remains back, but without the rear wing, that's going to be quite a handful.
I wonder how much more damage to the rear end of the car, because he's actually damaged the whole of the left side, hasn't he? Because even the front of that car, bodywork's about to come off. This is the one thing, the KTM, if it's not a full, complete car, it sheds quite quickly its skin.
In the British Touring Car Championship now, any flapping bodywork gets you a meatball flag. That is flapping bodywork on a new scale. That's the car falling apart, never mind flapping. That's your race leader. That's Carlo Tamburini then, who is 8.7 seconds ahead of Philippe Pret. So it's looking good for LP Racing, a 1-2 and the 2 class wins. And
another change of position for Loris Huysmans, who's now up to 7th, that famous racing family. Just getting past the 888.
Now, the KTM, sorry, what's left of that KTM that we saw a minute ago is being given the meatball flag, the mechanical warning flag. There is a problem with your car you may not be aware of, is the way it's phrased. There's also a mechanical warning flag going to 53. Now, that's Christophe Bouret. The car doesn't have any brake lights anymore, probably because they've fallen off as well, because that was the one, remember, that got rear-ended at turn 1. And had all the damage early on in the race. So 2 cars are going to have to come in with mechanical dramas.
I'm surprised it didn't have brake lights from lap 1, because there's been no further contact, but maybe they were just about holding on and then eventually have fallen off.
So, the good news is they've got plenty of repair time overnight. The bad news for Jean-Luc Bobelic is that Simon Birch has arrived right on his tail, under the rear wing of the Mercedes. The KTM darts to the outside line, and Birch goes through, makes that look easy.
Absolutely, and that... it's not actually, again, for position, but what it does do is force Bobelic right into the hands of Leroy, and that is for position, so we could see, well, sorry, I keep forgetting that he's already got 12 seconds, so it doesn't actually matter on track what we're seeing, the position change. Leroy might as well just stick on the tail of Bobelic.
But racing drivers are racing drivers. They all want to overtake, they all want to be ahead, don't they? And there the mechanic gives the regular instruction of, I think that's done.
Oh, he's already got the rear wing fixed.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's a good effort, isn't it? But it's what other damage has been done. Must have been quite a big impact, that, and we'd seen how much damage had been done on the left-hand side of the car. In also comes Christophe Bouret, but I don't think they can do anything about brake lights on that in the time remaining, so that car's pretty much done with 4 minutes on the clock.
Busy part of the circuit here, because Ralph Koffler in the 812 is on a comeback drive, looks down the inside, and not sure the 24 was expecting him to stick his nose in down there, because Leroy is focusing purely on Jean-Luc Bobelic ahead. Again, not for class position, but Koffler's setting his sights on Birch, who now has clear track ahead of him.
And again, that distinctive KTM rub as it grinds the ground, but of smoke is evident. So Bobelic on the track, 4th, Leroy 5th, Koffler 6th. That KTM's disappointed a little bit in this, not just race, but qualifying as well. Only 4th in the hands of Martin Koch, but lost a lot of time in that first segment of the race, and Koffler has struggled to be able to bring back the gap. Gravel on the road from Tamburini's earlier zealotry. He's now 9 seconds to the good. And look at all of that, all over the road. That would make me think that it was coming out of Les Combes, where Dominic Albert went off.
It was a feature last year, if you remember, having added all these gravel traps for the EWC, the Endurance World Championship for bikes. It was very much a feature last year of a dirty track, especially as we got into the second half of the 24-hour race. And whilst we don't have rain, that is very much a feature of today's action as well. Having to come out and clear the track every time there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity here for Koffler to look down the inside, and he's going to be squeezed. Koffler having to take to the grass on the inside to avoid contact with the Maserati. Shifts down a gear. The car spits out some unburnt fuel, and he's going to have another look down into karting. Not usually an overtaking position there,
but needs must.
And Leroy shuts the door for a second time.
Yeah, Alexandre Leroy, of course, doesn't need to defend in a sense from Koffler because they're in different classes, and he's going to gain the place off Bobelic anyway in the final analysis. But telling a racing driver to not fight and to let people overtake you doesn't always get through with that message. We've got 2.5 minutes of the race still to go.
But he he is able and faster than Jean-Luc Bobelic for sure, and he's sitting there because he knows Bobelic has a penalty. But now Koffler, again, Koffler looks down the inside, and again, Leroy really aggressive with the defense, finally gives it up. But they're not fighting for the same class anyway. Koffler is the pro in that Pro-Am car. But that's really done enough damage to Koffler so that he's not going to get on to the tail of Birch with 2 minutes remaining.
Absolutely. So 8-1-2, Reinhard Koffler goes by. Birch would be the target for second in Pro-Am. Even with this, he'll still be third in class and still end up with compensation time in the pit stops for tomorrow. But Reinhard Koffler, we know he's a quick driver, former single-seater racer, part of the Red Bull program very, very early in his career until the money ran out and the funding stopped. Red Bull backed away and he didn't have the money to continue, but kept his hand in with local races and through KTM really has been brought back into the fold and reminding people how good he is. So on the tail now of Jean-Luc Bobelic, Reinhard Koffler accelerates through the gravel. Not the trap, but the gravel that's on the road. I mean, it's virtually the whole width of the road. It's like a rallycross stage now.
A horrible noise as well when that's bouncing around the metal underneath your car. Worse even when it goes into a brake duct and then you've got a piece of gravel and you stand on the brakes, it just makes the most awful noise until you can get it cleared. Koffler's going to now clear Bobelic, although actually that Mercedes, as we've said all day, has got the grunt to accelerate away when needed. Might not be particularly strong in the corners, but it is good along the straights. Koffler getting the nice racing line through Double Gauche, but it is going to put him on the outside. Bobelic did this before, didn't he? Stayed on the right-hand side and let Birch through. He's done the same with Koffler.
But it's knowing when to hold and when to fold, isn't it? He doesn't need to race that KTM, so he stays ahead of Leroy, which is good for his own class position, even though there's that Damocletian penalty, but he doesn't have to fight the KTM. That goes through. Now, the leader is about to be overtaken by Pierre Caffer, and they're coming up to the chicane. They're going to squeeze another lap out of this. Here they come by, I would say, about 20 seconds. Up to the timing line they come. Through goes the leader. Yeah, about 16 seconds or so. They missed out on the checkered flag. So the last lap, and Pierre Caffer's target is to get back on the lead lap. That
gap's come down massively on that last lap. Tamburini's lost 4 seconds to Pret. So either paying too much attention to Pierre Caffer behind him or a bit of a mistake. But yeah, the gap is halved.
Unless they were trying to back the pace off so they didn't have to do another lap, but then realised they couldn't because it was going to be too slow a lap. Here comes Caffer. So he's in the wheel tracks of the Maserati, up to Les Combes, and that Audi trying to get itself back onto the lead lap. Pierre Caffer, fastest lap of the race done by him, has a look up the inside. Tamburini just needs to back out of that and let him go. The last thing he needs is contact on the last lap of the race.
You don't need to be fighting a guy that's a lap down as well, and whether the team haven't informed him or not, but he does look quite panicked here and trying to hassle Pierre Caffer off the road. I suppose there's also that racing driver thing of showing that you're faster than the other guy, even if there's a lap difference between them.
Yeah.
Especially in 2 driver races. But Tamburini is going to lose further time here. And in the background there, Louis Pret will be happily taking a victory if anything befalls the front 2 cars.
Down they come then towards Pouhon once again. So Philippe Pret, dad of Louis, goes through Pouhon. Louis will see in the 24 hours. Dad has a go at this, and this is another nice way that GT2 and GT3 integrate. So while Lad is racing, Dad can be on the same program and they can be at the same event, albeit in different races. Out of Piff Paff goes Philippe Pret. I'm just looking at sector times again because Tamburini was a little bit slower in sector 1, only by a couple of tenths. But you're right, Philippe Pret is having a red-hot go. And look how much Tamburini has fallen away from Pierre Caffer by. Is he just being ultra-cautious, or is there a problem? I'm leaning towards cautious, but we'll see.
He's backed the pace off, but it's still going to be okay. It's still going to be enough to take the victory. But 2 seconds in the middle sector, it's quite a lot to back off, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? Unless he's low on fuel.
Or he's having to be very careful, of course, about track limits.
Yeah, there's that. There are lots of possibilities. Philippe Pret will be a class winner, but it does look as though it's going to be another win in the third of the year for Carlo Tamburini and Leonardo Guarini. Checkered flag at the ready, out of the chicane, and it is going to be a Maserati win then. Carlo Tamburini brings it home, Leonardo Guarini started, and an LP Racing Maserati 1-2 with Philippe Pret second, and Ben the winning am.
Waiting for that third overall, KTM to come to the line. And still the battle for 5th position, which isn't really a battle because Jean-Luc Bobelic has that penalty. And I think Leroy has just decided that he knows that that penalty exists, so he's not going to fight, and he's sitting in the wheel tracks. Over the line, they come for 5th and 6th. There's been a KTM, 2 KTMs ahead, Birch and Koffler. And just in the background comes Louis Heismans to take 7th position, but it will promote him up to 6th because of the penalty, but he still will miss out, sadly, on a podium because there are 3 other Pro-Ams ahead. Boberleek. Will Boberleek stay on the podium? I think he might, because I don't think the 888 car is close enough to inherit 3rd position in class.
You might well be right. So an excellent run for Carlo Tamburini and Leonardo Guarini. And where did the contact come from? Just look at the back of number 1. There's a big pink mark there on that rear corner, as though he's rubbed up against somebody or something. Now, is that anything to do with the time loss?
It was a big chunk, wasn't it? 4 seconds.
Yeah.
But there was no other car around. We didn't lose any other car.
Unless Pierre Caffer had tried to get past and there was a bit of contact.
See pink?
Well, there's the orange flash on that car.
Yeah.
Clutching at straws maybe here, but it's come from somewhere. Anyway, plot thickens. But Carlo Tamburini, race winner with Leonardo Guarini. Philippe Pret will be happy with a class win, but of course they carry the maximum of the success penalties into tomorrow. Pret doubly handicapped in as much as you're also penalised for being a soloist.
3 out of 3 for the number 1 LP Racing Maserati for this year, though. Victory in race 1 at the first round of the year in Paul Ricard, and Misano as well.
Indeed so. It's a win per event, isn't it, for the Maseratis, making a competitive championship season. There, Carlo Tamburini brings the car back towards the pit lane and then to the podium. Spa, as a venue today, is rattling through lots of activity because there is the Super Pole to come for the 24 hours itself. Lawrence Tomlinson's Ginetta took the flag, Ben, but has then ground to a halt.
Yeah, at turn 1. Wonder if they've short-filled that car. Not another lap left to get the car around, so might as well park it up at turn 1, where in previous times you'd finish the race and literally turn right straight into pit lane, wouldn't you? Here is the provisional classification. It was just 2.8 seconds between the 2 Maseratis by the end. The gap was really 10 seconds. Anderson and Birch in 3rd, 2nd in Pro-Am, and Koch and Koffler 3rd in Pro-Am. 2nd in Am for Leroy, with the Boberleek and Vanelay Mercedes dropping down to 7th overall, but 3rd in that class. We had a few DNFs. We have quite a few DNFs. 2 KTMs, a Mercedes, and 2 Audis not getting to the flag.
And Philippe Pret taking another victory within the AM category from Alexandre Leroy and the penalised Gilles Vanelay and Jean-Luc Boberleek. So you ignore the result of the race in terms of tomorrow's grid. What we will have is that 2nd qualifying session order. Out comes the track sweeper, because next it will be GT3 cars for Super Pole to determine the top 10 rows of the grid for the 24 hours. That needs a clean track surface.
Absolutely. That is going to be incredibly entertaining. We have back-to-back action here at Spa, so wherever you are watching, jump onto the next stream, because there'll always be a race coming from Spa throughout today and tomorrow until we get to 4:30 local time and we go racing proper for the 24-hour race. But if you're here at the circuit, then you have wall-to-wall action from the very, very best GT cars, whether it be from 2000s, celebrating those heritage races, or indeed the touring cars from the 60s, and then the up-to-date GT2s, GT4s, GT3s, and let's not forget the McLaren Trophy. And
also, if you're coming to the circuit this weekend, on top of the building that we're in, where the pit brasserie is, you can just see it on the far left, there is a Race Through Time exhibition, and it's cars that are here as exhibits but not actually racing at the 24 hours, and lots of memorabilia as well, and that's worth a look. A recap of race 1. It all began with a bang as Eric de Donker's Mercedes was turned sideways, and we had also a big spin in the middle of the pack from the number 53 Mercedes. They sorted themselves out and were able to get themselves back out of harm's way and rejoin as the opening stint of the race continued, with Up front, Leonardo Guarini putting himself ahead of Alexandre Leroy. Philippe Pret was riding shotgun, and that damaged Mercedes. The number 53 car of Pascal Gimon limped back to the pits, although it did carry on in the race for as much as was possible. Bit of hip and shoulders. Thomas Anderson got himself up on the inside of the number 88 Mercedes, whereas 87 in the hands of Gilles Vanderlei and Jean-Luc Bobelic started to charge along and get itself up into the mix. So ultimately the car led briefly, but then Jean-Luc Bobelic had a big slide and he got a track limit penalty, and that car fell back through the order. Even going into the gravel didn't really upset Carlo Tamburini, as he and Leonardo Guarini came through for a third win of the season. And an excellent effort. More from GT2 tomorrow. For now though, from Ben Constanduris and David Addison at Spa, we'll see you tomorrow morning at 9:05 for race 2. Bye for now.